Rings of Power is one of the biggest misfires I've seen in a while. You think if anyone could end up making a good Lord of the Rings show, it would be Amazon. They've been making some of my favorite shows of late, but I guess all those have been some form of adaptation, and I don't think Tolkien has been putting out a lot of content recently. And you might be asking yourself, how could this show go wrong? It's Lord of the Rings. How could this show be bad? Well, it's actually pretty simple. The writing. The writing in this show is atrocious. How do these people have jobs? This is one of the most baffling and most incoherently written shows that I've ever seen. Some of these morons need to go back to creative writing 1, because this is a disaster. Oh wait, they've only written one other thing. No wonder this was a disaster. They haven't written anything else. Problem number 1, the structure. Alright, I'm gonna break out the whiteboard to show how incoherent and stupid the plotting of this show is. So in most stories, we want something like this. We start slow with the action building up to a climax, and then we have resolving action. Art isn't math, but this is a pretty surefire way to make a pretty basic, coherent story that just works. Lord of the Rings uses this, The Hobbit uses this, 90% of stories use this model. Unless you're a genius screenwriter like Charlie Kaufman or a Nolan brother or Tarantino, you shouldn't mess with getting too creative with this. Now, let's see what Rings of Power does. What is that? Episode 1 starts out with us setting up the plot and seeing where we are going. Sauron is coming back and going to take back the Southlands, and we need to stop him. Okay, good enough. We know where we are going. Then from episodes 2 through 5, all of our main characters that we thought would be progressing the plot to this overarching goal all end up getting sidetracked by random things. Galadriel, our main character, ends up stranded on a random island out at sea. This random elf dude ends up getting captured and going to an orc camp. Elrond doesn't care about the main plot, I guess, and decides to head to the Dwarven Cave. These random Kirkland signature hobbits find a naked old guy. None of this progresses anything, and we don't get back on track to the main plot till episode 6. Once again, let me reiterate, art is not math. There isn't one way to create a story that is fascinating and interesting and works on an emotional and thematic level. But when 50% of your episodes do not progress the plot, that is a problem. It makes the story so boring because nothing is happening, and there's a difference between a show being boring and a show being slow. A story moving slowly is a choice that is made so we have time to flesh out our characters and make sure that we understand the world, while also slowly unveiling the plot at a decent enough rate that the story doesn't lose momentum while it's prioritizing its characters. Shows like Better Call Saul nailed this. You're fascinated by the characters, you always feel the story's being put in a place, and it always has your attention. Rings of Power isn't slow, it's boring, nothing happens, they don't set anything in a place, these characters are not interesting in any meaningful way, and they just don't do anything. This is not a slow burn, this is bad writing. You might be saying, well, at least we have time to spend with these characters, and my response is, what characters? Problem number 2. The characters. These characters are some of the worst written characters that I have ever seen. Now, this show has a mix when it comes to our different characters. We have our legacy characters that were in the Lord of the Rings movies, like Galadriel, Elrond, Sauron, and Isildur, and then our brand new characters that, what are their names? There's Elf Guy, his girlfriend, Evil Sauron Jr., the dwarf friend of Elrond. Oh, this dude Galadriel met, Elrond's dad, this dwarf's dad, this random chick, the homeless hobbits, I almost forgot. Amazon made sure to leave a Wikipedia page under the show so I can read up on them. Awesome, I love this. You know how bad your characters are in a show for the streaming service to leave the wiki under the show that talks about the characters, their names, and their motivation? You know, guys, maybe you haven't written good characters if you have to leave your wiki under the freaking show. Not only are all these characters painfully forgettable, they don't function as actual characters. Let's break down how a normal character should work. If you have been to any writing class or seen any video on YouTube on how to write, there are 2 essential elements to a character working: what the character wants and what the character needs. Let's look at an example. Tony Stark wants to be a rich billionaire playboy, but what he needs to learn is that he should use his money and power to help others. He needs to be a hero, he needs to be Iron Man. This is just a basic example from a good movie, but even shows that aren't really that good manage to get this right. As flawed as the Book of Boba Fett is and how people don't feel it properly portrayed Boba Fett right, one thing you can't say about the show is that they wrote a broken character for him. You may disagree with it, but on paper, this character works. Boba Fett wants to be a ruler over Tatooine and wants to be a mob boss, but what he needs to learn is that he needs to rule with respect and with the help of others. But not every show has to do this for every character. We've seen lots of shows with a character that has wants and they actually get it, but it comes with the price of them getting corrupted. If you're a good writer, you can subvert these very basic character parameters, but if you're new to writing, it's usually a good idea to stick to the basics.
All I do is sit down at the typewriter and start hitting the keys. Getting them in the right order, that's the trick.
But the morons writing Rings of Power don't even get the basics right. Let's look at some of the characters from Rings of Power. Galadriel wants to kill Sauron and avenge her brother. What does she need to learn? That she needs to kill Sauron? She doesn't learn anything. She doesn't change. She just wants to kill Sauron. I guess Elrond is better, but his character arc doesn't make any sense. Elrond wants to get Mithril for his people, but what he needs to realize is that maybe Mithril isn't worth it, but then he'll die, so that doesn't even make sense. How they write these characters is such a wasted opportunity. You could show how these characters were different when they were younger and grew into these fantastic characters we knew from the movies. Like, let's look at Isildur. We know he's the guy who screws up and we know where he ends up, but we can explore how he got there. It can be interesting to see how he's different when he's younger. Oh, but they didn't think of that, so he's just the same as he was in the beginning of Fellowship. He's strong-headed, he's rash, he doesn't think. Why show them develop into these characters when we can just show the characters being themselves and running into nostalgia objects? Oh, hey, look! It's the giant orb thing from Lord of the Rings. I know that. And Galadriel's touching it. Oh, and don't let us forget that sensational song, "Not all those who wander are lost." What a great quote. Let's have a song.
No, please, not this. It's not going to be coming out of us. It's going to be going... I don't want...
And this is even worse for the new characters. You might have thought I was exaggerating when I said I couldn't remember any of the names of the new characters, but I honestly can't. They don't have goals. They are just these two-dimensional characters moving from scene to scene. And then compare that to Lord of the Rings. Every character in Lord of the Rings is so iconic. Throw any character up there and I know who they are. Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit cared about the characters. They know that's the lifeblood of storytelling. If you don't have good characters, you can't have a good story. But this show doesn't care about characters. Why do they matter? They're just there to get you in the seat. I know you'll watch if Sauron's in it. It's the burger from SpongeBob. Yeah, it looks good on the outside, but there's no substance to anything. So since these writers don't know how to write characters, they decide to use tropes for all the characters. Because why write characters when you can just throw them into the trope machine? Now every character is a fish out of water character. Galadriel doesn't know where she is. Isn't she a goofball? Hey, don't hurt them. Oh look, Elrond doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know his manners. How silly. Oh, looks like the other elf was put into a slave camp. Oh, the weird hobbits are in a new part of the woods. Why write an interesting episode? Why write a season that actually comes together? Because it's hard. Writing is hard, and it's hard to make something that's interesting.
Is it a compulsion, or is it like a structured exercise where you say, I'm going to sit down and write for 3 hours today?
It's neither. It's hard for me. I'm not disciplined that way. I wouldn't say it's a compulsion. I would say it's my job and I have to do it to pay my mortgage.
So why even bother? Just throw them into random situations, have them get angry to show emotion. Doesn't matter what they got angry about, they got angry, so I guess they have emotions. That means a real character. These characters are just two-dimensional husks being thrown from scenario to scenario with no purpose other than to convert oxygen for an hour as we just watch. And after we've dinked around with these characters for 4 episodes with literally nothing happening, the writers realize, oh no, nothing has happened. All the characters are split up, they're all in different places, and we need them all to come together for the final fight. So then they all think, okay boys, let's put our heads together. How do we get our characters back together? I know the answer. Why don't we write the easiest conclusions to all of their problems and then they're all just ready to go? Why set up goals for these characters to achieve? Who needs satisfying payoff to characters achieving goals? And you can just screw around with characters for 4 episodes and then Deus Ex Machina the problems away. So they're all ready to meet up for the final fight. It's like if right after Age of Ultron we went straight into Infinity War. Like, I guess these fights are cool, but what is happening? Wait, is Iron Man with Spider-Man? Is it Tobey Maguire version? Like, this is cool, but I don't know what's going on. How'd they get here? Are you guys starting to get a concept of how messy this show is? So by episode 6, they get to the huge battle, and you might be asking, wait, then what happens in episodes 7 and 8? Well, 7 is the wrap-up of 6, showing what happened in the aftermath, and 8 is the M. Night Shyamalan twist episode. Here we have all the reveals of who is who, and it is so clunky because the way the plot is put into action is by all these random characters from episodes 2 through 5. Why were the main catalysts of the finale these random side characters? These hobbits literally had nothing to do all season. Then in the final episode, there's a big reveal that only is going to pay off in season 2. Why was the story arc here? How could no one look back at this and realize what a mess this story was? If I had to guess, they had 3 major episodes planned out, and then they just stitched the rest of the show together. Because looking at the show overall, it's a mess. Episode 1 starts off. It says, here we are going. We're going to go here. This is the main story. And then by episode 2, we are completely off the rails. Then we have 4 episodes that do nothing. Then we get back on track by episode 6 and 7. And then the finale is this big twisty reveal that is set up by random moments and characters from episodes 2 through 5. Like, what? Oh my gosh, my brain hurts. The writing in this show is so bad. It makes it so hard for me to even give praise to any of the good elements that are in this show that do shine through. There are actually good things in this show, surprisingly, but no one is even talking about it because the writing here is so abysmal. The cinematography throughout the show is breathtaking, constantly making the show a beauty to watch, and you could feel that there is care there, along with the direction most of the time is great. There are moments of fantastic direction that truly show off what the show is capable of. You can see the director, the storyboard artist, the visual effects artist trying to make something unique that truly stands out. The music by Bear McCreary can be fantastic. He has shown time and time again how he knows how to make fantastic music that can truly be incredible, and he is great here. There are people here who actually care, and you can see that through every part that isn't the writing. The sets are fantastic, along with some of the costume designs. My gosh, these costumes look amazing. These directors are taking completely subpar material and giving it everything they got to try to make it as something that can actually work. It's almost heartbreaking because none of these directors wrote this show. They all saw the chance to direct a Lord of the Rings show. Who could say no? You could see how everyone is trying. You see how the visual effects artists are creating these beautiful vistas, and there are moments that do break through to show something incredible, and there are hints of how fantastic this show could be. Most of the actors here are doing, alright, I guess. But in particular, Galadriel, Elrond, the dwarf guy, and sexy guy are all doing a pretty good job. But there also are a lot of performances in this show where they are not the best. I don't know if it's the writing, because we've already established the writing's terrible, but some of these characters, it might be the acting, it might be both, but man, there are a few characters here that are just big ol' stinkers. But those 4 that I mentioned do a pretty decent job, and I actually cared for them somewhat. I have to give that up to the acting, because if they managed to somewhat make me care for their characters with the terrible writing, I think that's kind of impressive. Everyone in this show feels like they showed up except the writers. I think what happened was Amazon got the rights, and then they just sharded out the first people who could come up with an idea. Didn't matter what it was, as long as it was Lord of the Rings. They crapped out this story, it was a mess, and they just let all these other people have to assemble it and pick up the pieces. And it's honestly pretty impressive that the show wasn't an entire crapshoot. I mean, how could it be? It has such a big budget, so many talented people, that there were bound to be a few good moments that do shine through. There are good moments. The show always looks fantastic. It sounds amazing, but it is never able to escape the absolutely terrible story and its incredibly bland characters. This show is a cautionary warning of what happens when you don't take your time writing a show. This show could have been fantastic if they just taken their time and realized the opportunity they had to tell a fantastic story in Middle Earth. This could have been something amazing, but it just ends up being a beautiful mess. And that's why I'm gonna give Rings of Power Season 1 a 4 out of 10. But I'll be there for Season 2. But if you boys manage to screw it up again, or worse, royally screw up Sauron, you might have this in real life. Just take your time, you know? Take your time, write a good script, make sure it's coherent, make sure Season 2 really is a step up. Step up your game, make sure it's great, and you're already in production. You guys suck.